Okay, so my talk did have a title. It does have a title, and the title of it is Amoghasiddhi and the Heroic Life. Yeah, so that's what we're going to be exploring tonight. And I just want to start with a quote. So something that my teacher, Danayutta, the founder of this movement, said in 1969. He gave a talk on the heroic ideal in Buddhism, and this is my favorite line from the talk. He said, "The Buddhist life is the heroic life, and it's heroic in the highest possible degree." Yeah? So the Buddhist life is the heroic life, and it's heroic in the highest possible degree. I don't know about you, but I just love that quote. I just love that. I love adventures. I always have. I love the ideas of adventures. Sometimes I don't quite like going on them, but I do love the idea of a quest, I suppose. I used to read quite a lot, and the sort of fiction that I like reading is science fiction and fantasy, because it's adventure. It's going somewhere, it's doing something, even if it's just in my head, yeah? And I love a good story about a hero or a heroine. I love a good story about a hero or a heroine. I love a good story about there being a cause, something to strive for, demons to overcome, obstacles to sort of surpass, this hustle between good and evil, magic to cast, spells to sort of bring into the world. I just find it just very, very transporting, very transporting. So tonight, what I really want to do is to talk about our spiritual life, our sort of Buddhist life as a quest, and just sort of look at Amoghasiddhi, I suppose, and see how he can help us, how he can inspire us, how he can guide us. So firstly, if we're to embark on a quest, we need a vision. We need a cause and we need a goal. Yeah? So we need a reason to go on this quest. And I suppose for Buddhists, the goal of our quest, the goal of our spiritual life is enlightenment, it's awakening. And there's probably, millions of hours of talks in that one sentence, and there's a lot of material that you can look at. I just want to particularly point you to Maitrabandha's talk from the Open Day a week ago. And that was a very, very good talk on enlightenment. Do watch it on the LBC YouTube page. But for tonight, maybe we can just think of enlightenment, think of the goal of our quest as the coming to sort of full potential of human our full potential for wisdom, for compassion. It's kind of like full flowering of our wisdom and compassion. And it's something that's ineffable, and it's something that's mysterious. But I'm sure all of you in this room would have had a glimpse, or even if it's like a glimpse of a glimpse, it's something, a very, very tiny, small glimpse of what it might be. And we have glimpses in different ways. Some of us might have sort of managed to find ourselves somehow, maybe through chemical means, in sort of superconscious mental states, superconscious states, and we're just sort of trying to work that out in our lives. Just what does it mean to be expansive, expanded beyond our sort of rational mind? Some of us might have had moments in our lives where we're just sort of unfathomably wise or unfathomably kind, and we're just trying to understand how to be like that all the time. Or some of us might come to the Buddhist Center because we're just trying to find an answer to the suffering in our lives, the suffering in our worlds. So even in its absence, even in the absence of wisdom and compassion, that is a glimpse, yeah? So that's the goal of our quest. To come into our full potential, to develop wisdom and compassion, to wake up, to develop it to such a pitch that's beyond human understanding, so beyond our rational understanding of, in a way, what's possible, yeah? And it is really hard to imagine these qualities in abstract. So what we need is these qualities embodied in a form, embodied in people. It's very, very hard to think of human qualities in abstract. So we need a form. And that's why we've got these archetypal Buddha figures. Yeah. So we take the archetypal Buddha figure as a goal, as a vision. So having set our goal and embarked on our quest, what usually happens is we hit obstacles. We hit obstacles. And obstacles in our life, in our spiritual life, are sort of inner and outer, and sometimes the inner manifests as an outer, yeah? And we have these obstacles at all levels, really. I'm sure you know what we're talking about. Even, in the level of that little meditation just now, with the distractions that appear and, sort of drag us away from the breath. That sort of like slight inability to concentrate or to even want to concentrate. There's sort of bigger obstacles, like really doubting that spiritual life works, really doubting that our meditation practice has an effect, our Buddhist practice has an effect, to the sort of really, really big obstacles, or sort of really big, what can feel like obstacles, I suppose. I guess it's quite hard to talk about, but maybe you might think, maybe if you have had these sort of meditation experiences where I suppose you slightly dissolve a bit, and sort of loosen your sense of self. And actually that can be very, very scary. That can be quite frightening. It can also be exhilarating and freeing, but sometimes it's just quite uncomfortable. Yeah. So, and the thing about our quest is that it's about transforming ourselves. It's about changing ourselves. When I first started going on retreat, we used to be like a little bit of a smaller group then when we went on these retreats. And often at the start of the retreat, we do these icebreaker games. We used to be about 30 of us going on retreat, and we do these icebreaker games. And a lot of the time, the icebreaker game was we'd go around and say our hopes and our fears. And I often found myself saying that my fear was that I'd find out something about myself and I'd have to change. That's right. But even worse than that fear of finding out something that I have to change, is a fear that I do all this and I won't change. Yeah? I don't know if you resonate with that, but people here are nodding, so maybe you know what I'm talking about. This fear that I won't change. So yeah, transformation and change is scary, and it's also exhilarating. So let's just go back to Amoghasiddhi for a moment. So Amoghasiddhi is, he's a figure of deep, deep integration, ultimate integration, and he's also a figure of fearlessness, so integration and fearlessness. And just talking about my own life, I suppose, just reflecting on it, I think for me, most of my obstacles are of the inner variety. So most of my obstacles are of the inner variety. And mainly, most of my obstacles are inner, and they're due to me not being very integrated, sort of being actually actively disintegrated. So there are parts of me that want to live a spiritual life, and there are parts of me that just do not want to live a spiritual life. There's parts of me that want to meditate, and want to get concentrated. I do want to reach one-pointedness in the mindfulness of breathing. And I've been reflecting on Heroes and Quests, and I've had the Lord of the Rings theme song playing in my ear. And there's a part of me that just wants to get to the crescendo of the theme song. Like I really do want to, listen to it to the end. Sometimes when I'm on retreats, it doesn't happen so much, these days, but I used to really like watching movies in my head in meditation. I just like play the same scenes over and over again, that kind of disintegration. Like I am actually on retreat. I've actually gone to retreat. I'm actually sat in the retreat center shrine room, and then there's part of me that I just want to be watching a romantic comedy over and over again. So I sort of feel it for me, like there's there's an inner tussle. Like, these are quite small examples, but obviously there are much, much bigger ones, and I'm sure all of you will have that in your life, even if it's not yet. You will have that in the future. And in a way, this kind of integration is part of growing up. It's very, very human. It's very understandable. But we do need integration to make progress in spiritual life. And integration happens at quite a few levels. So if you just have a little look at Amoghasiddhi, just right at the top, it's quite faint and it's quite sort of blurry, but you might be able to see these creatures, these sort of half eagle, half human creatures. And these creatures are mythical. Obviously, they're mythical. And they're called shang birds. So these are sort of Amoghasiddhi's creatures. Throughout this week, we've been exploring all the different archetypal Buddhas, and all of them have had a sort of creature associated with them. And these shang birds are Amoghasiddhi's particular creatures. And for me, the shang birds sort of represent a kind of integration that's, I suppose, the integration of our animal part of ourselves, the kind of sort of like primal human part of ourselves. The thing is that we do need to integrate the animal part of ourselves, the human part of ourselves. So we do need to, in our lives, I suppose we've got needs for food and shelter and warmth. And it's not as if in the spiritual life you just sort of cut this off, You don't sort of try this, starve yourself, live on the streets or something. Actually, the Buddha did try that before his enlightenment. He did try ascetic practices where he sort of really starved himself almost to the point of death, and he realized I suppose he realized that it didn't work. It wasn't actually bringing him any closer to waking up. It didn't bring him any closer to enlightenment. So instead of trying to cut off our sort of human body with its human bodily needs, its animal bodily needs, we need to sort of bring that along with us, yeah? I think we also have a need for companionship and intimacy. And again, that doesn't get cut off, that doesn't sort of get put off to the side. I was reflecting on this, and last year in late spring, I went on an Origination Retreat, and it was 3 months in the remote Spanish mountains. And I think that was just the happiest period of my life. I don't actually think, I'm pretty sure I know that is the happiest period of my life. And there were many reasons for being happy. I got ordained. That's a big thing. I really wanted to get ordained, so that was a big reason why I was quite happy. We were living as a community, maybe 21 of us. It was quite sort of remote, and we were away from the distractions of the world. And all of us were meditating, practicing, sort of really, really deeply trying, and all of us were sort of doing that together. There was magic. There was something completely mysterious about ordination, mysterious about spiritual life, and that was really evoked at its highest pitch. And all of us were doing that together. So sort of keep coming to that, back to that refrain of all of us were doing it together. And I think this thing of all of us doing it together it satisfied a deep primal need in me. I sort of talk about it in terms of the need to be part of a pack. The sort of pack animal part of me. But I don't mean that in a gross way. I mean that in a really refined way. So doing things together and sort of collectively refining ourselves, refining our practice so that it reaches a pitch that is, beyond animal, beyond human, and actually something quite mysterious and magical. I was there for 3 months. You might be able to feel this even on a shorter retreat. And I think sometimes, particularly in our morning meditations, which have, they kind of begin at dawn, again, it's sort of like magical time, and we sort of come into the Buddhist center in an atmosphere of silence, in a way the atmosphere preserved from the night before. Sometimes that can have that sort of atmosphere as well, where there's a collective energy, a collective momentum, and we just sort of slip in. Yeah, and it's very, very satisfying. So I'm just going to move on to another symbol in Amoghasiddhi, which is the double Vajra. So in Amoghasiddhi's lap, he's holding the double Vajra. And we encountered the Vajra when we met the Buddha Akshobhya earlier. So the single Vajra, Akshobhya holds the single Vajra. The Vajra is a symbol, it's sort of talked about as a diamond thunderbolt. And it's a symbol of energy and a symbol of indestructibility. Yeah. But when you get two Vajras fused together at the center, what you get is what's known as a Vishva Vajra, so Vishva Vajra. And the Vishva Vajra symbolizes the sort of fusion at its highest degree of opposites. So the fusion of opposites at its highest degree. It's sort of talked about as the interpenetration of all opposites, the interpenetration of all the opposites in the universe, in the cosmos, the interpenetration at a sort of psychic level, like everything in our being is sort of fused together, penetrated together, and it's sort of penetrated as well with the universe, with the cosmos. I don't know about you, but in a way, I kind of don't really know what that means. It is mysterious. I suppose thinking about my own practice over the years, I think the closest I can get to it, perhaps, is the metaphor of being a bigger container. So if you've been around the Buddhist Center for a bit, you probably would have come across this term of being a bigger container, or sort of like growing into a bigger container. But I think actually it's really, really good. So it's not as if that over my years of practicing meditation and practicing ethics, sort of trying to study, and it's not as if things don't come up. It's not as if there are not things in my psyche that I suddenly unearth and they sort of stop coming up. Things that, if you're quite new to meditation, you might sort of find that happens quite a lot. You suddenly realize things about yourself, and they can be quite destabilizing. And it's not as if over the years of practice that doesn't continue to happen. It does continue to happen, and hopefully it'll sort of keep happening all the time, so that all of ourselves comes up to be transformed. So it's not as if things don't keep coming up, but it's a bit like you're just a bigger container, or I'm just a bigger container. And things that come up are a little bit more known, can be held a little bit better, can be integrated a little bit more quickly, I suppose. I don't know if any of you are familiar with physics. Maybe just Vajra Mati. But in physics, there's this sort of concept of a center of gravity. Do people know what a center of gravity is? It's to do with shape and mass, and basically, you can sort of balance something on its center of gravity, and it sort of won't sort of fall over. So it's a bit as if like the center of gravity stops being one point in our being where we sort of teeter around. It grows a bit bigger, so there's a whole area that is the center of gravity. And that's quite an important point, actually, because the Vishva Vajra isn't a symbol of balance, yeah? So it's not a symbol of balance, it's a symbol of fusion and interpenetration of opposites, and it's not balance. So it's not as if like in our spiritual life we're trying to balance, yin and yang, or something a bit wishy-washy like that. We're not trying to find balance in our spiritual life, because actually something that's in balance is quite easily knocked over. Yeah, you can knock over something that's in balance. Instead, it's a fusion of opposites. What we're trying to do, I suppose, is to live a middle way. Sometimes you hear about Buddhism talked about as the middle way, with a capital M and the capital W. And it's not as if the middle way is a median. It's not like the center line of a thing, of a path. The middle way is not a compromise. What it is instead is something that is above and beyond, something that sort of transcends polarization, transcends opposite. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. That's the kind of integration that we're sort of aiming for, where more and more of ourselves is known, and then something transcendental starts to arise. Okay. So to achieve this kind of integration, we need a path. And Amoghasiddhi's path is a path of fearlessness. Yeah. So he holds his right hand up in the gesture of fearlessness. So this is called the Abaya Mudra, the gesture of fearlessness. And Amoghasiddhi's whole being is one of confidence and calm. Amoghasiddhi sort of embodies confidence and calm. He embodies confidence and calm. Sometimes in the morning I've been sort of holding up my right hand just to see what it's like. And it is pretty lovely. If you do that in meditation position, it's like, oh, it is sort of confidence giving. It is calming, yeah? And then I was just thinking a little bit about fear. And actually, in Buddhism, one of the antidotes for fear is metta. Yeah, one of the antidotes of fear is metta. You might be surprised to hear this because, mainly metta, we talk about it as an antidote for hatred. But actually, it's also an antidote for fear. So before I was a yoga teacher, I used to work in the city. I was a quite a successful investment banker. And I was thinking a bit about the kind of confidence that I used to have when I was in the city. And I think the kind of confidence that I used to have was a mixture of bravado and cynicism and sarcasm and humor. It's slightly embarrassing to admit this, but I was young. I was quite young. I was in my early 20s, and I was working on the biggest trading floor in Europe, and with a lot of people who are way more experienced and taller, and mostly better looking. And I did try to have some self-confidence, but it was quite brittle. And mainly it was a sort of armor that I put on my way to work. And it was a mask. It was an armor and a mask, yeah? So an armor, something that sort of fends off the world, and a mask to hide what was going on inside, yeah? But the confidence that comes from metta, is confidence that comes from love, yeah? It's a confidence that comes from practicing deeply and honestly and really loving oneself and allowing oneself to be loved. It comes from skillful action. It comes from action that's imbued with loving kindness. And it comes from knowing that there's nothing to defend. Knowing that there's nothing to defend at a relative level of action and at the absolute level of self, yeah? So with metta, we face our demons. With metta, we sort of overcome our obstacles, inner and outer. With Amoghasiddhi sort of walking beside us, we sort of walk through life with fearlessness. We integrate with fearlessness, yeah. So if we have a measure of fearlessness and if we have a measure of integration, what then arises is energy. So if we're a little bit integrated, if we sort of bit unblocked, there's energy. Because actually what happens when we're disintegrated, when we're sort of pulled in opposite directions, doing one thing and then the other, we waste energy. I was thinking about, so in my banking days, when I first started coming to learn to meditate, they said have a regular meditation practice. So I did it once a week on a Saturday morning. But actually that was a terrible time because on Friday night, I'd be out partying with my friends. And on Saturday morning, I'd be trying to meditate. And basically it didn't go very well. Just I'll sit there trying not to feel sick. So when we're disintegrated, we kind of just waste our energy, we sort of fritter it away. And when we're fearful, when we're out of fear, unable to act, what happens is that we're a bit blocked. Our energy stagnates. The disintegration and fearfulness is not the only way that we sort of block or fritter away our energy. I was thinking about rumination and having arguments with people in my head. Again, in meditation, so when we go round and round and round planning, round and round and round planning talks even, or round and round planning our weekend, or planning how to get together with whoever we fancy, or sort of anxiously worrying about work when we actually can't do anything about it. When we sort of allow ourselves to dwell in negative mental states, dwell in righteous indignation, dwell in jealousy, that takes up energy as well. That wastes energy as well, And I think in our quest, in our spiritual life, we need as much energy we can gather. We need as much energy we can access, whether it's the primal desires, the kind of primal needs, or this kind of sort of psychic energy, or whether it's just sort of raw physical energy. We need to be awake if we're going to meditate. We need to be awake if we're going to study the Dharma. And I mean literally awake, as in not sleeping. We do need that. So Amoghasiddhi represents energy unlimited, unbound, and energy that's moving in one direction. Everything that we can gather, everything that we can get behind ourselves, moving in one direction. And that direction is waking up. It's pursuing enlightenment, So that's the obstacles in the quest. So I just want to go back to this idea of the quest and idea of adventure, and just draw another aspect. So one of the things about tales of adventures and tales of heroes for me is that there's usually a merry band of companions. There's usually sort of friends on the path. Frodo had Samwise, he had Gandalf, he had Orlando Bloom and Viggo Mortensen. Harry Potter had Hermione and Ron. So, we need friends on the path. Friends on the path are sort of it's almost not an optional extra. The lonely heroine or the lonely hero is quite a sad thing. So in the spiritual life, we don't go at it alone. I think perhaps maybe if one was exceptionally spiritually gifted, you might be able to, perhaps. But I suppose in my experience, and probably because I am practicing, it's part of a sangha, part of a community of practitioners. What I see in myself and in my peers and in the practitioners who I respect is that we need other people around us to be practicing alongside us. We need to practice alongside other people. And it doesn't matter, if they're, if we sort of consider them less advanced or more advanced or, same advanced. It doesn't really matter. We do just need to be part of a community. And the slight problem, I think, with the way we've been exploring the archetypal forms, the archetypal images of the Buddha over the course of this week as we have, is that they're sort of depicted on their own in a way. So actually sometimes they are depicted, these archetypal figures, the archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as forming a Arya Sangha, a noble Sangha. But actually, if we do want to get a flavor of Sangha, do want to get a flavor of community, we have to track back to the historical Buddha, track back to Shakyamuni Buddha. And if we go back to the stories that have come down to us over the years, if we go back to the Buddhist canon, what we find is that stories of the Buddha and his disciples, stories of the Buddha and his companions, his followers, and his friends, I suppose. And he had many disciples, and quite varied disciples and followers. There were kings, there were queens, there were paupers, there was a mass murderer, at least one. There were men, there were women, they were young, they were old. It was all very, very varied, in a way like us, like us. And the Buddha's disciples, it's all really clear from the story that they all live together as a community. So there are stories where the Buddha is sort of looking after them, sometimes in quite practical ways, sort of looking after monks that were sick. There's stories of the Buddha teaching his disciples, rejoicing in his disciples, sort of drawing out the best qualities in them, sort of protecting them, guiding them, really caring for them, their being, their sort of human being, but also their spiritual welfare. And there's stories of his disciples doing the same for him. And one of the most beloved figures in the Buddhist canon is Ananda, who is the Buddha's attendant. And it was so lovely, the stories about Ananda and how he really loved the Buddha and how he really served the Buddha. In a way that I hope that I will love my teachers and serve my teachers. And some of the best stories from the Pali Canon, I think, are of the stories of the disciples themselves, of between the disciples themselves. There's the stories of the Aniruddhas, the sort of three companions who sort of live together as a community, and it's said that they sort of mix like milk and water. And there's this lovely line from the story of the Aniruddhas: "Why would I not want to do what my noble kinsman wants me to do?" And it's like, why not? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you do what your friend wants you to do? Yeah. There are these stories from the nun, this sort of nun poems of awakening, and sometimes they start by saying, "I went to a woman, a wise woman in whom I had trust." Yeah, I went to a wise woman in whom I had trust. So these sort of stories of their relationships, their companionships. And I just sort of think, I just think that it's not that dissimilar from us. Subhadra Mati was making that announcement about the development of a community. In a way, you can think that London is really, really busy, and there's lots of people in London, and we're coming together to do this. And already friendships are forming, already a little community is forming. And we've only been doing this for a week, and not even on a full-time basis. One of I think, my loveliest highlights from the urban retreat was last night. Subhadra Mati and I were the last people to leave the Buddhist center. And as we walked up the road, there was Elena and Valerie and talking to another lady, just standing outside at the top of Globe Road, just chatting. And this is like almost 7:15, still chatting. And sort of, that is community forming. It's like really engaging with each other, so much so that you don't want to go home. That is community forming. So just to go back to Amoghasiddhi, I think that our friends can sort of manifest Amoghasiddhi in our lives. So our friends can help us integrate. Hopefully they help us do that in a kind way, so kindly and gently and lovingly point out our blind spots so that we kind of know what it is, and so we can try to sort of work with them. Hopefully our friends can give us confidence when we're low in it, when we sort of like lose our way and full of doubt in ourselves. Maybe they can give us confidence and sort of draw out our best qualities, rejoice in us, and sort of re-establish us in metta and self-esteem. Hopefully our friends sort of inspire us when our energy is flagging. When we sort of feel like we just can't do it anymore. And hopefully they can go like, yes you can, you have it in you. And we can do that for our friends too. Yeah, we can do that for each other. So we can bring Amoghasiddhi into the world. We can embody integration. We can embody fearlessness. We can embody energy for the benefit of each other, for the benefit of the people in our lives, the people in our worlds. And that was how Amoghasiddhi will manifest in the world, through our actions. Yeah. So, just coming to the end of my talk now. And what I want to do is track back a little bit to where the talk started, where I sort of launched off, which is the vision, the goal. Actually, I think often we might come to the Buddhist center, come to learn to meditate, to practice Buddhism, find out a little bit more about Buddhism for ourselves. So maybe we sort of come because we want to be a little bit calmer, we want to be a little bit happier, we want to be a little bit less stressed, we want to be, I suppose, I kind of wanted to be was hoping to be a nicer person, I guess. We kind of like do this for ourselves. And as a goal, it's an all right goal. So there's nothing bad about wanting to be a better version of yourself. But it's, I think if we set that as the goal for our spiritual quest, we'll probably be disappointed and we'll probably fail, okay? Because it's too small, it's too limited. In Buddhism, there isn't really such a thing as dry wisdom, wisdom that doesn't come along with compassion, doesn't come along with an altruistic, outward-going dimension. Because actually, compassion and wisdom, they're not two. It's a bit like compassion is the dynamic aspect of wisdom, yeah? And because we are embodied beings, because we are in this world, wisdom will manifest through us, through the body, yeah? Will manifest through compassionate action. If you think about it, metta is not a theoretical thing that happens in our head on our cushions, from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. It's not just all stuck there in that time. Metta sort of has to manifest in our lives to completely transform us. So we can't but have an effect in the world. And if we do indeed try to have an effect on the world, we then sort of like affect our lives as well, affect our minds as well, yeah? So in a certain sort of sense, there's no other way to practice, yeah? There's no other way to practice than to practice for the sake of all of us, ourselves included, and all beings. So if we really understand the nature of suffering, if we really understand the nature of conditionality, if we really understand the nature of interconnectedness, we'll know that. We'll know that there's no way but to practice for the sake of each other. And if we can do that with other people doing the same, if we can do that in a community of practitioners, of other people doing the same, other people sort of walking the path of illumined imagination of Vairocana, other people practicing the path of beauty and abundance of Ratnasambhava, people practicing the path of wisdom of Akshobhya, people sort of practicing the love of Amitabha, people practicing fearlessness of Amoghasiddhi and ultimate integration. If we can do that collectively, what a force for good in the world we can be. Good.